Hi and welcome to another carpenter tutoring tutorial. I'm Amy and today we're going to be talking about what real numbers are and some of the different categories that exist within real numbers. So first and foremost, what are real numbers? Well, real numbers are any values that we can put and represent on a number line. That means real numbers contain positive numbers, negative numbers, whole numbers, fractions, and decimal values. On the flip side of real numbers, we also have line. We're not going to delve into imaginary numbers for our purposes today, but it's good to know that they exist as a complement or what you could consider an opposite to real numbers. But within real numbers, we do have several smaller or more specific categories of values. The most specific of those is the natural numbers. Natural numbers are what we could consider counting numbers, starting with 1. So they would include values like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, up and up and up forever and ever. Up next, we have whole numbers. Whole numbers are also counting numbers, but they begin with 0. So the whole numbers and natural numbers are almost exactly the same, except that natural numbers do not include 0, and whole numbers do include 0. That means that the whole numbers would start with 0 and then go up by 1, including things like 1, 2, 3, and so on, up and up and up forever and ever. The next category that we have is the integers. Integers are also counting numbers, but they can be both positive and negative values. That means that going down, we could start with a number like 0 and go to -1, -2, -3, and so on, all the way down to negative infinity. Or counting up, we could start with 0 and count up to 1, 2, 3, and all the way up to positive infinity. Rational numbers. Rational numbers are any numbers that we can express in a ratio or a fraction. So long as both the numerator and the denominator of that fraction are integers. That means I could use any counting number, whether it was negative, positive, or 0, in the top and the bottom of a fraction that would represent a rational number. When we're talking about rational numbers, these are values that can either be expressed with a decimal that ends, so something like 3.75, or with a decimal that repeats forever, so something like 3.9 with a repetition sign over top of it. On the flip side of rational numbers, we have irrational numbers. These are numbers that cannot be expressed as a fraction using integers in both the top and the bottom. So they can be fractions, but they're not going to use integers in both the numerator and denominator. When we talk about the decimal version of these numbers, irrational numbers will have decimals that continue on forever. So if we think about something like the value of pi, well, pi really equals 3.14159, but that decimal continues forever and ever and ever with no repeating pattern and no ending point. That is what an irrational number looks like. So talking about our different categories of numbers, we can start to organize these from broadest ideas to narrowest ideas. All of the categories that we've talked about so far are included within real numbers. So real numbers is our overarching category. Then the real numbers are split into either rational numbers or irrational numbers. Irrational numbers are the end of their side of the organizational chart. So once we discover that a number is irrational, there aren't any other distinctions that we can make for it. But we can go deeper with our rational numbers. So rational numbers also include all of the integers, and integers also include all of the whole numbers, and the whole numbers also include all of the natural numbers. That means if we have a number that we decide is a natural number, it's also all of the higher types of numbers in the chain moving all the way up to a real number. So for example, a natural number is also a whole number, an integer, a rational number, and a real number. If we have a number that is an integer, but is not a whole number or a natural number, then we could say that that integer is also rational and is also a real number. But it doesn't necessarily have to be whole or natural. Knowing these different categories of numbers and how they relate to each other can help us communicate more effectively about mathematical concepts. So I hope it's been helpful to go over these together. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. Please be sure to let me know in the comments if there are any other topics you'd like to see discussed. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.